Alright, Trekkies and Trekkers, now it's time for the third episode of Review of the Day, Through the Looking Glass. Sisko, Odo, and Quark are in the station commander's office, debating the disposition of 27 Cardassian vols, which Sisko claims are intended for fighting. Apparently, Quark and Morn were discovered painting numbers on the vols' backs in Quark's storeroom, even though Quark claims that they were Morn's pets. Sisko orders that the vols be confiscated, suggesting that Morn wants new pets, he can get some goldfish instead. Quark says, "Poor Morn, this is going to break his hearts." Sisko then walks out into Ops, where an unnamed lieutenant tells an unnamed lieutenant Ops is yours, and walks towards the turbolift landing. Just as the car carrying O'Brien, who's out of uniform, who surprises Sisko, who asks if O'Brien is going somewhere. As O'Brien steps off the turbolift, he tells Sisko he needs to converse privately. Then after Odo leaves, Quark draws a phaser. However, Sisko immediately orders the Ops crew to stand down. After ordering Sisko into the transporter pad, O'Brien waves the multidimensional transport over the normal transporter controls, after which O'Brien and Sisko transport to a radar, and Sisko asks where they are. "I guess you could say we just stepped through the looking glass," O'Brien says in reply. O'Brien leads Sisko into another compartment, and in a quick moment, Sisko disarms him. At Barrel's end, O'Brien confirms that they are in the mirror universe. Since the time last year Kira and Bashir crossed over, the Terrans have started a rebellion against the Klingon-Cardassian alliance, and the rebellion at issue was led by Sisko's counterpart, until he was killed when the ship he was on was destroyed by the alliance. Sisko demands to be taken back to his own universe, as he can't further influence events there. O'Brien then encourages him, explaining that, in his universe, Jennifer Sisko is very much alive, working for the Alliance on the transspectral sensor array that will enable the Alliance to root the rebellion out of their bases in the Badlands. In closing, O'Brien explains that if Sisko will not retrieve her from Terek Nor, the rebels will be left with no choice but to kill her. Sisko concedes that he cannot bear the death of a second Jennifer Sisko, and agrees to attempt her rescue. On Terek Nor, Jennifer Sisko arrives at Attendant Kira's quarters, clearly not enthusiastic about talking to her. The attendant informs Jennifer that her husband has been killed, but she is not fazed, as they did not part on good terms. Back on the radar, O'Brien, or rather Smiley, as he's reminded Sisko to address him, explains that Jennifer despises her late husband, who was much better fighting than leading. Finally, the two of them transport to a rebel base, where a new mission is under discussion. It appears Bashir is ready to take charge of their force, and wants to simply smuggle explosives on the station and detonate them, no matter the risk. Just then, Sisko and Smiley enter. As Bashir looks on Sisko with a gimlet eye, Tuvok points out they all thought Captain Sisko dead. Sisko attributes it to propaganda. He successfully wins over the group with his confidence, but then Jadzia saunters in to give Sisko a kiss of gratitude, a slap across the face for letting her think that he was dead, and a question, "Are you coming or not?" Sisko hangs back so that Smiley can explain to him that Jadzia is Sisko's mistress. Jadzia seduces a reluctant Sisko, who returns her advances. Ooh. On Terek Nor, the attendant is dismayed by the decreased productivity on the station. Garrick says he's doing all he can, but she takes him down to the processing center and orders gratuitous executions of Terran slaves as an incentive. Garrick suggests that she's been in foul humor ever since Captain Sisko was killed. The attendant denies it, which is clearly frustrating, and Garrick knows it. As the rebels are restless about the impending completion of the sensor array, Jadzia is telling Sisko that she's tired of fighting the Alliance after not seeing progress for a year. She's tired of living on the run, and says they ought to just abandon the rebellion, as their group of ex-slaves with delusions of grandeur are not capable of winning. Sisko says he's not ready to give up just yet, and they must make sure Jennifer Sisko does not complete the sensor array. Later, with the whole group, Sisko insists, over Bashir's objections, that Jennifer's rescue, not her death, is their next objective. Bashir continues to argue, and, quietly during, O'Brien suggests to Sisko that he hit him, as the other Sisko would. He goes over and hits him just as he starts talking about his wife. He berates him for doing so, though Bashir and Dex remind him it would be much easier to kill her than convince her to leave. O'Brien reminds him that they need a scientist to help them counteract the Alliance's efforts. On Terra Nor, Rom is on the station to inform the attendant that Cisco is alive, and that is information that will lead to Cisco's recapture. Cisco and Smiley and a fighter soon become surrounded by decloaking Alliance ships en route to Terra Nor, captured and taken to the station. The first thing Cisco does upon leaving the airlock is to kiss the attendant passionately, as they briefly discuss the likelihood of his execution. Kira then moves on to O'Brien and chastises him for betraying the Alliance. After Smiley explains that he did it because he wanted to be free, Kira contemptuously orders him sent back to ore processing, and she leads Cisco back to her quarters. Once there, she explains to him that she can't trust him. He'll be over time before she needs to dispose of him. Later, Jennifer arrives, accompanied by Garrick, who leaves no doubt as to his hatred of Cisco. After Garrick leaves, Ben and Jennifer spar over Ben's velocity and womanizing, but Ben puts a stop to that by explaining that he's on the station to rescue her. After more arguing, Ben uses the adversarial nature of their marriage as a wedge to suggest that she's working for the Alliance as a response to his leadership of the rebellion, and finally asks her to defect as an alternative to slavery. Cisco tells her to think about it, then uses a subdermal communicator to alert Smiley to his progress and disables the guards on the attendant's quarters. Smiley creates a diversion to get himself and several slaves out of ore processing, while subduing a few guards in the process. With Ben guarding the door with 2 Klingon disruptors, Jennifer ultimately agrees to follow him, only after insisting that she still hates him, and the two of them meet up with Smiley and the former slaves in the habitat ring. They need to coordinate to subdue a few Cardassian soldiers, but they successfully reach the airlock where Rom's shuttle is docked, only to discover Rom's corpse hanging from the airlock door by a dagger through the chest. On the verge of being overpowered by the attendant and her men, and with no obvious means of leaving Terra Nor, the rebels head back to ore processing with Jennifer in tow. Once there, the rebels engage in a firefight with the guards, and after promising Jennifer that he will get her off the station, Cisco starts manipulating a console, explaining to Smiley that he hopes the designer of the Mirror Universe Terra Nor is the same Cardassian who designed Deep Space Nine. The attendant and the troops, with their ultimately forced entry into the rebels' haven in ore processing, which orders the rebels, excepting Jennifer, killed, only to have Cisco tell her that doing so would be a mistake, because he has initiated the station's auto-destruct sequence. Thinking that he's bluffing, the attendant points out to Cisco that he doesn't know the needed command authorization code, at which point he proves her wrong. When she tries to stop the sequence, she discovers that Cisco has changed the command code, offers to let him off the station who will give her the new code. He demands that he and his companions be let off the station first, and the attendant capitulates, closing with a note to Cisco that she will hunt him down. On their trip from Terra Nor to the rebel base, Jennifer insists on knowing who Ben really is. Commander Cisco tells her that she can ask Smiley to fill her in on the details, and the two of them say their goodbyes when Smiley arrives to take Cisco back home. So now let's take a look at some trivia surrounding this episode. The name Through the Looking Glass was the last line Major Kira had said in the Season 2 Mirror Universe episode Crossover. This episode was filmed after Improbable Cause, but before the die is cast, because the decision to make Improbable Cause a 2-parter came so in the schedule that Through the Looking Glass was already in pre-production. This episode picks up in the Mirror Universe where Crossover left off. Crossover had itself been something of a sequel to the Star Trek original series episode Mirror Mirror. This episode contains the only reference to the Romulans in the Mirror Universe. Alliance ships are seen decloaking in this episode. This is in direct contradiction with the episode The Emperor's New Cloak, where a major aspect of the plot deals with the delivery of a cloaking device to the Alliance, who don't possess the technology. Non-canon novels attempt to explain this as the difference between Alliance cloaks and Romulan cloaks. This episode takes its name from the 1871 Lewis Carroll book Through the Looking Glass. The sequel to Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, the book features Alice's further adventures in a fantasy world beyond a mirror. It's also the phrase Smiley uses to welcome Cisco in the Mirror Universe early in the episode. Kira also uses the same phrase at the end of Crossover, when asked where she and Bashir have been. In the opening scene where Cisco has ruled that the Cardassian voles should be confiscated, Quark says he'll break Morn's hearts, plural, implying that Morn's species has more than one heart. Kira Lofton does not appear in this episode. Kira Nerys, Miles O'Brien, Jadzia Dax, and Julian Bashir do not appear in this episode, only their mirror counterparts. The only regular characters who appear are Cisco, Odo, and Quark. The Raiders Corridor, Transporter Room, and the Turbolift are redressed of the USS Defiance sets, using computer graphics from Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. To make it look different, the lighting department used a harsh red light to contrast with the bright lights of our universe. The Raiders Bridge was a redress of the runabout cockpit, which had been redressed in the same style several months earlier as the Maquis Raider Valjean and Caretaker. Though referred to as a Terran Raider, the model of the ship itself resembles a Bajoran interceptor. This is the second 2 consecutive episodes to feature no scenes with the real Kira or O'Brien, but only alternate versions of them. The representations of them in Bashir's mind and dissonant voices, and their universe counterparts in this episode. So overall, I think this episode is pretty dang good, and I do love Mirror Universe episodes, and yep, this season, this show definitely has a couple of them, so there you go. So overall, I give Through the Looking Glass 4 Warp Cores out of 5. Well, anyway, tune in a bit as we take the final episode of the day, Improbable Cause. So, until then, live long and prosper, everybody.